All right, everyone, 6:30. Are we recording? Yeah, okay. So I'll call to order this Lincoln County Planning Commission. As a reminder, the meeting is being recorded, so the order of events tonight will be as follows. Each public hearing, staff will introduce the agenda and present a summary of the staff report. The applicant will then be asked to explain their proposal in further detail and to answer any questions from the Planning Commission members. I will then open the floor to public comment, first to people in support of the application, and then persons in opposition of the application. When you step to the podium, please state your name and address and speak into the microphone. Speakers are encouraged to only address new and relevant information, and above all, please be cordial to everyone else. Refrain from side conversations, or I will ask you to leave. Lastly, decisions of the conditional use permit applications may be appealed to the County Board of Commissioners by submitting a letter to the County Planning Zoning Office within 5 business days. All right, that's all that official stuff. All right, we call to order. Commissioner Enstead?
Here.
Commissioner Hogan?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Poppins? Commissioner Scott?
Here.
And Jungling is also here. All right, next, the approval of the meeting minutes. So May 17th, I think we've all seen and reviewed them. Was any discussion or changes? All right, well, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve, Scott.
I'll second. Hogan?
All right, we had a motion and a second. I'll take a roll call. Commissioner Enstead?
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, next one to the approval of the current meeting agenda. Toby, are there any changes?
No changes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any changes? All right, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
Second, Johnson.
All right, motion and second. Discussion, nope, I'll take roll call. Mr. Enstead?
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, we're getting right through these fast. Good work. All right, public input on non-agenda items. So anyone like to speak on anything, topics you'd like to discuss, anything that's not related to the agenda tonight? All right. We will go on to old business. Any old business, Mr. Brown?
None, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I think we'll start with our first hearing.
Good evening. I'm Tony Brown, representing County Planning. This first item is an application to change the zone of the subject property from the A1 Agricultural District to the I1 Light Industrial District. Subject property is approximately 1,600 feet south of the city of T. The applicant for this item is Dennis Verhey. Subject parcel size is approximately 2.14 acres in size, as outlined on the screen there. The property is currently vacant. It did have a single-family dwelling that was recently removed from the property. The applicant's purpose for this application is to develop the property for contractor shops. First and foremost would be his own business, and then I believe that possibly leasing or renting to other individuals. The applicant did submit a concept plan with the application that again identified that there would be a building placed onto the property that would be utilized for his business of contractor shop, and then again additional lease space. As noted in the staff analysis, this proposed property is within the urban expansion area as identified on the future land use map of the comprehensive plan. And that urban expansion area then falls under the City of Tees comprehensive plan. The City of Tees comprehensive plan identifies the subject parcel as future employment area. And so staff analysis or staff recommendation is for approval of the application. The application appears to be consistent in the spirit of the goals of the comprehensive plan. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff?
Just, Toby, I think you mentioned it, but this fits into the comprehensive plan as far as where we want these types of designations.
Correct. So again, this is an urban expansion area, delineated area. And so the underlying comprehensive plan would be the City of Tees, and it does meet the City of Tees comprehensive plan, so it is in conformance with ours.
So then under City of T, it's not zone future residential or anything, it's just in their plan?
Yep, and their plan is future employment. And I'll point out again, in the staff analysis or in the staff report, we did point out that there is a mix of residential, commercial, and light industrial in this area. And so the next phase, if this is approved, would be a conditional use permit. And staff made note that with the conditional use permit, we're going to require that there would be some landscaping and buffering around the property to anticipate the future residential to the south and to the east of the property.
And Toby, the property to the west is still A1 agricultural?
Correct.
Yeah, because I believe everything to the, well, not to everything, but the next one to the east is residential.
Yeah, south and east is A1 zoned, utilized as rural residential on both separate parcels.
All right, commissioners, any further questions for the staff? All right, no further questions. I'll ask the applicant come forward and discuss a little bit about their plans.
I'm Dennis Verhey. Complete Fence is my business. We currently run out of essentially the T exit area. The plans for the 27284 470th is for us to build a shop to utilize for our business. Immediately, we would occupy a little over 50% of the building, and then possibly rent out a portion of that. But the intended use is for us to occupy the whole building as we grow. As far as the placement of the building, we kind of had that site plan that we put up there. So keeping in mind that there is the residence on the south side, what we were looking at was to put that building all the way to the north side of the property. And there is an easement, a little drainage creek that flows through there. And so really, we don't have any plans to make any changes or do anything that would affect that south side of the property. Behind the building, we would possibly use as some storage for fencing materials, but like full unit, I know a guy that does fence, so obviously we would want it to be fenced in and not visible, not an eyesore, but just looking for a place that we can utilize for our business. And as far as renting out any of that shop space, one of the current issues that I'm facing right now is the other units where we're renting are all like based on having vehicles come in, and so we've got a mechanic there and a detail shop, and so the biggest challenge for us is to pull in and out, in the morning and end of day, and have the parking lot full of vehicles. So, if I was going to rent that out, that would be something that I would definitely want to keep in mind, that it's not something that's going to have a lot of vehicles that, we're going to be fighting. That's a big liability for us to be driving our vehicles in and out and, have stuff in the way. So that's one thing that, I know as far as looking at renting any of that space out, that I wouldn't want it to be something that is going to be real high traffic or have stuff parked out front. Ultimately, I put in a lot of hours and I've got some young kids. And so I want this place to be as clean and organized as, you know, what I would have at home so that my kids can come out. And if I got to work a weekend, I've got a safe spot for them to hang out and have fun. So, you know, it's just as much about that as it is about having the potential to run my business and grow my business out of, so.
Thank you, Dennis. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Verhey?
Are you currently in any other locations in that area?
So our current shop is off of Sunset Boulevard, so it's just about 2 miles to the north right now, and we're running out of that area. We just right now are leasing like a 40 by 65 with some outside space out back to store some stuff, and I really like the area. We're doing a lot more work on south side. We've been getting more into like Parker, T, Harrisburg. So that's primarily one of the likes of that area is to get into some of the smaller communities that I think are a little bit underserved, and it's just about as easy to access as going to the east side of Sioux Falls, so.
You had said you're going to use it primarily for your business, but you might possibly rent it out or rent some space out to some other folks?
Right.
Do you already have those renters, or do you know who they
No.
would be, or what kind of business
No,
it
I
would be?
don't. You know, we're basing everything, you know, as far as like the banking side and everything like that on that we can do this without having to rent that space out.
So you would prefer not to?
If I don't have to, that'd be great. I think realistically, we probably would. The concept building that we have designed has 4 different spaces for like contractor type shops. We'll occupy 2 of them. One where we keep our trucks and equipment. The other one more is like where we're gonna keep material and do like some small fabrication, like building the frames with chain link gates, welding, ornamental gates, that kind of stuff, but pretty minor just to have a separate shop. The 2 that would possibly be rented out are on the far north side. So that would also be the furthest from I believe the only one that's currently occupied of those residents is the one immediately to the south. So anything that would be rented out would be the opposite side on the north end. The one is like drawn up as a 55 by 65 unit. And then the other one is basically just a 16 wide by 65 deep. So more of like a cold storage. Okay. So it'd really be, you know, only one of those 2 that would be utilized by another business if we rented it out. The other one would probably be more like a personal storage situation. And I did talk with the neighbors immediately to the south, kind of about our plans and hopefully to break the ice and make sure that, you know, it was even something before we dug in too deep that they didn't have any major concerns about. And I think with, you know, their view right now is a big concrete pile waiting to get crushed. And, you know, when we talked and I told them about our plans and they're a younger couple, they've got a younger kid that kind of likes to run around on that south end of the property and play in the trees. And so they said that they were pretty relieved to kind of hear what our plans were for it, to not, you know, go in and utilize the whole thing, just make one massive shop out of it. They said that that property to the east, there is a house on it, but from what they knew, he doesn't live there. He's been working there cleaning it up, but they didn't know if his intentions, and I don't know if his intentions are to live there permanently or not. So I haven't talked to him.
Good. Very good. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, any other questions? Yes, I got one more. Have you spoke with the township about roads and, I guess, employees and traffic?
I've just talked with Kevin, in T. I have not talked with township or anything. I currently have 7 employees. I don't think we'd really go up a whole lot from there. And we work Monday through Friday, so that would be, I guess, one thing that we'd wanna check into.
Okay. Yeah, my concern is just the road, it gets traveled a lot, it's pretty bumpy.
All right.
If this works out, we're gonna be neighbors. So, all right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, I will ask anyone to speak in favor of the proposal. Seeing none, I'll ask anyone to speak in opposition of the proposal. All right, with that, I'll close the floor to public comment, and I'll ask a motion of the commission.
I have one question, Commissioner. Question for Toby. So in the other 2 units, if he was to rent those out, whatever types of businesses those would be, would they have to come get a conditional use permit?
Yes, and he will need to obtain a conditional use permit if this is approved as well.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
All right, so I'll ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve. Scott?
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Commissioners, any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll do a roll call. Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. Congratulations.
Good luck.
All right, Toby, next one, please.
Okay, thank you. This next application is to rezone the subject parcel from the A1 Agricultural District to the RR Rural Residential District. The subject property is approximately 3.5 miles northeast of the city of Harrisburg, current city limits. The applicant for this item is John Schwartzley. Subject parcel is approximately 43.22 acres in size. The concept that was submitted with the application, it was a preliminary plan that will be on the agenda later for your consideration, is for a single-family residential development. The staff analysis in the staff report is a recommendation of denial for this application. Staff's opinion is that, of course, this is, and since 1995, the county has incorporated density zoning into the county. And at that time, we encouraged not to rezone to rural residential properties and utilize the 1 per quarter. There are, however, in the past, the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners has looked at adjacent properties and has utilized that in their decision-making process for the character of the area. As you can see, and this doesn't show the full vicinity of the area, but there is quite a bit of what I would call single-family residential use in this particular area. But the comprehensive plan doesn't identify this area as future residential, identified it as future agricultural. Second part to this is that this property is not within a subdivision authority of a municipality. The joint jurisdictional area with the city of Sioux Falls is just to the north and across the highway. And the city of Harrisburg is limited by extraterritorial jurisdiction, so they don't incorporate into this area. They are growing though, and they are expanding, so I anticipate sometime this would be within the plating jurisdiction of the city of Harrisburg. However, at this time, again, the comprehensive plan identifies this as future agricultural area. So again, staff recommendation is denial of this rezone application. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any question for staff?
I'm just reading through stuff, sorry.
All right. All right, with that, I will ask the applicant come forward and describe their
Hi,
intent.
I'm John Schwartzley. Our Our purpose is to,
Excuse me, John, can I get your address, please?
27313 Jordan Drive, T, South Dakota. Our intent is to develop 29 lots with 2 ponds, 2 retention ponds. We plan on building homes there and having lots for sale. We think this is a great location for rural residential. I think it fits in nicely with the surrounding areas. I really don't know what to say more than that.
No. it's fine.
But we think it's a good fit for the area. Gim Gadshaw is related to David Long. It's the Long property. It's a continuation of 2 other subdivisions, or 1 subdivision, 2 different phases. We think it's a great fit, and it provides a nice area for people to live.
All right, thank you, John. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
Do you have any, like, direct rebuttal to the planning staff as far as their suggestion to deny the application?
I think that the rule in 1995 is a dated, outdated rule, and I think that should be examined. I don't understand why it doesn't fit the criteria, to tell you the truth. With the surrounding areas and everything that's going on, I'm a little confused on why it doesn't. Maybe that needs to be looked at.
What are your plans for drainage in that area?
JSA, Pat Schwabach here, is a little more astute at talking about the drainage. But go ahead, Pat.
Sure. My name's Pat Schwabach, 26779 Country Acre Drive in Sioux Falls. I'm with JSA Engineers. John come in and asked us to look at developing this, and so we designed a grading and drainage plan to keep the houses from flooding and to control the stormwater discharge from the property. I brought along some drainage maps, some models. It's actually a printout of the model that we've done. And so we identified, where the existing drainage is going. And I understand there are some existing drainage issues out there that affect the subdivision to the east. So with our plan, our grading and drainage plan, we created a pond at the northwest corner of the property and one at the southeast corner of the property, so that we can send all the runoff to most of the runoff to those ponds and slow down the water as it leaves the development. So
Yeah, just stick your
what do I do?
Just right there, and she'll zoom in on it for you.
Yep.
Good. This one first is the existing drainage model. Okay, so this drawing will show us north is up, you can see the north arrow, and the drainage going off to the northeast corner. I understand from just looking at it and from hearing from property owners that there's some drainage problems back there in those yards from the existing runoff, the runoff from the existing agricultural use. With this development, having lawns and lawn-type grasses, will actually have less runoff off of those types of yards than we will off of the current agricultural use. But so the drainage goes to that point, and this yellow along Prairie View Avenue shows some ponding. It's between 1.5 feet and 2 foot, and that's in a major storm event, a 100-year event. And that water builds up and eventually flows south through culverts underneath driveways and also to the north, and then it flows east through culverts there also. It just takes a while to drain. And I understand the culverts may not be big enough to let that water go as fast as people would like to see it leave. Off to the northwest, there's a existing culvert under Highway 106 to 71st Street. That basin has approximately 14 acres, and the property that drains to that, drains to it, and the culvert controls how fast it leaves. And I don't know of any issues related to it since it's ag use right now. You can see the small annotation for the 5-year event shows that there's 10 CFS leaving in a 5-year storm. In a 100-year storm, that's 21 CFS. And we can look back at the east, northeast basin and see those runoff values, those calculations also. Cubic feet per second, people have all heard that well enough. It's a measure of the water, the flow rate leaving the property. In the southwest corner, there's a basin E5, 3 acres, it's headed south, and E4, 2 acres headed south. And then in the southeast corner, there's 5 acres headed currently east through the subdivision on the Meadowlark Street in the ditches. That's what our model shows.
So when you make those models, is that considering bare ground as it is now, or is that with the 28 or 9 houses already built?
This model, this first one is our existing model, and that's the way it is now,
With bare ground?
bare ground. And then I'll have another one that'll show with the 29 houses built. That model compares to what Lincoln County has currently very well. You'll notice in that northeast corner where they have the issues, the model looks very similar. I'm having trouble seeing it myself right now. In this area here, looks very similar to this. And so that's confirmation for us that we're on the same page as you folks.
Yeah, but back up to my question. Do you have a model where what happens to the water after you got all the houses built?
I do, and
This one?
here's the proposed model and what our model shows it would look like after the development. And this is totally built out for 29 single-family houses, paved roads. And in that northeast corner, you can see the flooding depth and inundation is greatly improved. It's much less. There's 2 different discharge points. The southern one has, in the 5-year storm, 3 CFS headed east, and in the 100-year storm, 9. And then to the north, it's still going to be going east. There's 2 and 5. And so if you add those together, even though they're going to 2 different points, which is also a benefit, the 5-year storm is 5 CFS, the 100-year storm is 14, compared to what was, well, 5 and 9 is 14, and 14 and 37 is 51. So in a 100-year storm, from 51 to 14, so almost a quarter of the water will be headed to that area of the existing subdivision. Looking at the south, of course, that would be a concern. The southeast corner also, it's an existing neighborhood, and they have existing yards and ditches and everything else, and we have a responsibility not to make their situation worse with our development. So we have that detention pond in that southeast corner that's going to accept all of the drainage from a kind of a triangle that splits the area. And we'll be taking, I think it's 17 acres to this pond. And this pond is good sized. It's almost an acre itself in land area. And it'll be close to 20 feet deep in total depth, a lot of that'll be standing water, ordinary water, dependent upon groundwater elevations and precip. Flow rates to the southeast, existing. There was, the model shows, I'll put it back quick. In the 5-year storm, 2 CFS, in the 100-year storm, 6. So very small amounts. And in the 100-year, or in the proposed condition, we would show 1 CFS in the 5-year storm, so that's half as much. And 5 CFS in the 100-year storm, so 5 versus 6. So we think that the detention ponds will actually improve the drainage situation for the existing subdivision to the east. And addressing to the north is equally important, but so far we haven't heard much from anyone north of the road. We have a large detention pond there that John has aspirations that that could be a community pond that would have a beach of some sort, a picnic area. Fishing. Some fishing and a couple of parking spots for people to park at.
Picnic benches and some pergolas for outdoor use.
So in addition to its function as a drainage control structure, it would also be some sort of recreational, some use as a recreational development. So in that northwest corner, existing going across through the culvert and to the north, we got 10 CFS in the 5, 21 in the 100. And we reduced that to 1 CFS in the 5-year storm and 5 CFS in the 100-year storm. So.
And not to interrupt you, but so you're telling me because of basically you're able to bring down the runoff because of these retention ponds?
That and the development, just having lawn grass absorbs more water and reduces the runoff off of that existing ag ground.
Yeah, I'd argue with you on that, but those are your two bases, that you got the retention ponds and then that it's lawn, but you're also taking up, a fair bit of the square footage with roof and not turning it into corn ruts either that use 25 inches of rain or, moisture a year either, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the other thing, and I don't know if you've put that into the calculation, is you take normal crop ground, the water utilization there is much, much higher than what bluegrass is or something like that. And so you've got a lot more area to absorb moisture than you do in a residential area that's paved and lawns and roofs and so forth.
Yeah, so actually the curve number, the Manning's coefficient off of row crops of dirt is actually fairly high. And the Manning's runoff number for bluegrass, a lawn, is much lower, or vice versa. So it'd be a Manning's N of 0.24 for a bluegrass, and for a row crop, it's closer to 0.1. So the thought is that you'll get more runoff off of dirt, but
I understand your thought, but I mean, I know it for a fact by watching it that isn't exactly how it works. But yeah, I didn't know what you guys had used to take into consideration what the row crops are using up too, because you do have absorption there as well.
Agreed. Yep. And then we have the detention ponds, which have that storage volume and will release the rain, the water slower.
But those are your main 2 points on
Those are
why
the
we're
main
gonna
points.
why we'll have less runoff is because of detention ponds and because we'll have grass instead of corn.
That's right.
Okay.
Other details, there is a small area that would drain south off the backyards of 2 of the lots, half of 2 lots. That's our drainage plan, and I'm happy to take questions on additional questions on that.
Commissioners, any other questions for Pat on on what he's got. I have one for you, Pat. So when you consider the detention pond, you just consider the 20-foot depth for to control the runoff and all that stuff. But if it's a high water table or it's stocked with fish, is that ever gonna go down enough to meet that CFS that you're discussing?
So the CFS, the discharge values that I give you, the flow rates, those are based on a full pond, the pond being full up to the outlet point. So it's just the bounce, the extra above the outlet point that's producing these numbers. So if it's a drought and those ponds are down further, there'll be even less runoff because it'll fill the ponds first.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Commissioners, any other questions for John and/or Pat?
I do for John. So that smaller just a couple things. So the smaller retention pond, I'm kind of in a unique position because I'm also on the Harrisburg Planning and Zoning. So are you gonna have a fence around that smaller retention pond since there's I'm assuming kids, you're gonna have fences around that? Is it gonna be
I don't believe so.
no fence? Okay. And then, as Toby said, right now Harrisburg's not there, but Harrisburg's going to be there. It will be out there soon, probably 5 years, so. There'll probably be an annexing question there about going into Harrisburg, so that's gonna have to be something you're gonna have to be thinking of. So this right now is not something that Harrisburg City itself, if you would have went in front of Harrisburg, I can tell you that this is not something we would look at. So I'm just gonna let you know that right now, so.
Appreciate that.
But I was just worried about that retention pond. I just worry about those big bodies of water out there with all these families and single,
Well,
with kids.
The retention pond isn't like just 20-foot deep
Right.
off 1 foot, so it's a graduated thing.
Right,
So you would have to wade out there and, but most parents should be responsible for their children.
yes, they should, but
I don't think the
sometimes,
developer or anybody else should be.
right, but sometimes unfortunately parents aren't, so,
Well, there's lakes and ponds all over South Dakota.
right,
So
right,
I don't see these being any different than that.
okay.
John, the residential areas to the north and to the east of your property, how long have they been in existence?
I'm not exactly sure, at least 20 years. Some of those houses are quite old. Yeah, I mean, we don't really know how old those houses are, do we, Pat? We don't know anything about those subdivisions as far as the age. I mean, I'm not aware of it.
And I guess we can ask Mr. Brown
Toby should
later too,
know.
but I mean, are they prior to 1995 or what, or?
That'd be a good question for Toby.
No, 96 and 97.
I have a question for Toby. Is that allowed?
Yeah, if you can direct it up
Oh,
here and we'll
sorry.
get an answer for you.
How many subdivisions have been approved since the ordinance has been in place since 1995?
All right, I asked, but I don't think there's a way we'd know that one. Toby, do you have any idea?
I couldn't quantify it, no, but there has been some, as are these two here.
So this really isn't a unique situation, I don't believe.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you, John.
Thank you, sir.
All right, at this time, I would like to invite anyone up to speak in favor of the application. All right, seeing none, I will ask anyone to speak up, come up front and discuss anything against the application.
I'm Mark Noble, 47952 271st. I'm at the southwest corner on the north side of the road there. More questions than anything. Am I allowed to do that, Chairman?
If you direct them up here and we'll
Okay.
get an answer for you.
First question was, where's the main road going to be on the northwest side that exits onto 271st? Is that going to be in line with the western side of Prairie Hills, road to road? Okay. The next question, are you going to have a well to keep the pond full if it is a dry season? So it doesn't just turn into a big dirt hole?
We never even thought of it. So, no, we don't have any intention for that.
Okay.
Open suggestions from the community.
Okay.
Excuse me, well,
Oh, sorry, I can't do that, Mr. Chairman.
thank you.
Is there any motion to have a well?
Right, well,
We
we'll
keep it
ask
full.
We'll, we'll bring him back up and ask him.
Okay,
those
great.
questions. Yep.
Last question was the culvert going north through 106. I was wondering if that's going to be controllable to actually increase flow rate potentially during dry seasons. I do have a pond to my north, and I'd also like to see, I think my property is actually prior to 1995. But we, with the agricultural runoff that we already have, we had to dig our previous owners dug a big retention pond there. So we got about a 30-foot pond ourselves back there that keeps all the stormwater out. So if we go down to 1 or 5 cubic feet per second, we'll have a big dirt hole in the back of on the north side of our property.
which lot were you again? I'm sorry.
I don't know exactly which lot number it is. It's the Rezac edition, it's nested inside that
4795,
subdivision, but it was there prior, I believe. So it's that one right there. And there's a 30-foot-ish size pond on the north side. And right now, it's already dipping down because of no water. Those are my only questions.
Okay,
Okay, so just so we got your questions, culvert, pond, and driveways, correct? Were
Correct.
those are the 3?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank
main
you.
road, wells, culvert, yep. All right, is there anyone else like speaking against the application?
My name is Bob Weirheim, 27120 Prairie View Avenue. We're representing the homeowners just to the east there. And we're not really necessarily speaking out against the rezoning necessarily, but I know as the plan gets developed, we've kind of had a discussion in our neighborhood, and this may come into consideration for your vote tonight, is that Meadowlark Street, as it is right now, it deads in at the new properties there. And we would ask for consideration to maybe not continue that street into the new development. The contention of our neighborhood right now is that we have bus traffic stopping on 271st Street and on 135. And when those buses stop there, we have public traffic that tries to take a shortcut through our property and take the L around there to miss the stop sign and the bus traffic. And in doing that, if we extend Meadowlark Street, which on his proposed plan is not even identified, it's Meadowlark Court, it wouldn't even be a continuation of Meadowlark Street. It'd be a different name for 911 purposes and everything else. So we would like to see, or at least consideration for Meadowlark Street to be terminated as it is right now and maybe not continue on into the new development. It's just a consideration. We're not against the development by any means, but just as this process goes on, we want to make sure that's considered.
Can I ask you a question? Whose decision would that be?
Well, I think it'd be probably back to the planning commission when he,
I
at the
don't
next
think
agenda
so,
item
because I don't think
probably.
I don't think the county would have any jurisdiction over those roads. So is that you guys as a subdivision, you think, or
Well, we're a road use district right now.
you are?
Yes,
That the county takes care of?
no.
Okay.
It's privately maintained, but yet we are paying it through our taxes into Lincoln County.
Interesting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And then, Toby, correct me if I'm wrong, this portion is a rezone, so we would talk about streets or anything that would be in a different,
Yeah, that's your second item
right?
later this evening, yes.
Okay. All right, is there anyone else like to speak in opposition? I don't want to see any arm wrestling for who's next, so just,
I think I would lose. Craig Morris, 47979 Meadowlark Street. I'm right across the street from Bob, just to the east there. My question is around 2 retention ponds, and is there any requirements around having to maintain mosquito kill, anything like that? Is there? I just live two lots over from the southeast proposed pond, and of course, standing water, I'm really concerned about it, just really infesting us with mosquitoes. I'm not sure if that's
sure, yeah, I don't think there's anything we can do about that. I mean, I don't think
Fish? Okay.
Now, that'd be something to work out with the developer and/or whoever lives next to them, I suppose.
Okay.
Or maybe if they have a homeowner association.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
My name's Ron Elbers. I'm at 27156 471st Avenue. I own the quarter directly to the south. And I'm not really, I'm not really in favor or not in favor of it. My biggest concern is the water runoff. The development to the east, I had three guys that live there, and they run their hose all the way to the property line, and they dump their sump pumps on mine, and they wouldn't do a thing about it. I talked to them, they wouldn't do nothing about it. A couple of them moved, and I talked to the new people, and they actually run the water. The water's supposed to run up to the north. And this engineer that talks about water runoff and how much corn uses and what grass, there's a big difference between runoff and usage. Corn will use a lot more water than grass will. If you're talking about runoff, grass is going to slow it down. You don't need to fool me standing here. And I don't think you fool anybody up there knows anything about crops. But the detention pond on the southeast corner, I'd like to know where that water is going to be discharged at. It should be discharged down the ditch on that Meadowlark Lane or whatever, is where that water should be discharged. But anytime you develop 25, 30 acres of ground somewhere in the county and around that area, you will lose about that many acres of crop ground. I've lived in this county my whole life. I've lived around development my whole life. Anytime you develop something, the water has to go somewhere. When you talk about roofs, when you talk about all this stuff, these detention ponds, they dig a 20-foot pond, fills up full of water. Now when you get a 3-inch rain, where's the water go? The pond's full all the time. It runs off all onto the neighbors. They have that development to the east. I know a few people that live there, and it's been quite a few years ago, they were talking about tiling that because it was so wet. They had so much water in the basements. If it ever got tiled or not, I don't know if it did. But there is water issues in there. And I don't know if what he has is gonna probably control some of the runoff some of the time. But most of us in this room know how many 100-year rains we have gotten in the last 10 years. It's been a lot. It hasn't been one. We get one or two of them every year. We haven't in the last year or two. So, and there's water issues out there. And I don't know where that water is. He's talking about the water in there. When he talks about runoff and usage, that's two different things completely. Two different things completely. And when the city of, and I don't know specifically, but when and if the city of Harrisburg gets out there, there are some rules and regulations there that they can put in to a development like this that the county, I don't think, can. They've got a little more control over the roads, over the water runoff, and all that stuff, I believe, than what the county does as a whole. That's my opinion of it. And I think that's one reason why they're telling you guys probably to deny this and why they're denying it. So wait till they get a little more, the city of Harrisburg will have more control over some of these developments, which in turn I think is good for the county in long term. We got road issues. We got all kinds of roads are busier than we know what to do with. I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming, but some of this And like this here, I'm just worried there's water coming, and I don't know what's gonna happen. I know on Arthur Estates over there where I live, by Baker Crossing, I mean, they dug them 2 big ponds. They had to put wells in both of them to fill them up. They're 20, 30 feet deep to fill them up. And then they get them full, and the water's running across Bob Mester's. Then what's gotta happen? The county was in a lawsuit, I don't know whatever happened, but somebody had to pay and put a tile all the way across Bob Mester's down to 9 Mile Creek. So, a guy wants to be careful with this water stuff, because once stuff is done, it's hard to stop it. When it's coming on to the neighbors, what are you gonna do? So, I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Any questions?
All right, I will ask anybody else that would like to speak in opposition of the application.
Chad Bile, 27096 Deer Hollow Court. So I live on the north side of the road, right directly in the middle of the cul-de-sac that is the farthest to the west. I am probably not here to speak in opposition or in favor of, I guess more to just be recognized for the north side of the road. We have an immense amount of water issue on our side of the road already. I would dare say, I believe we have close to 28 homes. Of the 28, 20 of them have their sump pumps run 365 days a year. We deal with water drainage already. Where that is coming from is we have the springs. We have springs that run. We have gravel veins that run through our lots. That my concern is the retention ponds of where that water seepage comes through the gravel veins that run to the north, to the there's a big ravine to the north that the Spring Creek runs through. That would be my consideration of where that retained water is going to leak away. Where does it leak away to? Into those underground gravel veins that, in my opinion, will be running to the north. So that would be my concern of what is their plan? How much water do those retentions lose through drainage into the gravel veins that are there in those properties? So,
Thank you, Jed. All right, is there anyone else that'd like to speak in opposition of the application?
Mr. Chairman, we did receive an email that I'll read into the record if that's okay at this time.
Thank you.
So, and again, I think I wouldn't say this is for or against, we're just gonna read it. So this is from Jason Tinklenberg, and this was addressed to Commissioner Aaron, so I'll skip some of the parts and just kind of summarize part of it. But let me explain that I reside immediately north of this proposed development in the Bluffs at Spring Creek. My address is 47964 Prairie Hills Trail. Please understand that I know the Long family personally as president of the Bluffs Spring Creek HOA. Have had many interactions with Dave, Lori's son. I've also found him to be level-headed and a straight shooter. My wife and I still remember purchasing our home lot from Lauren and Lori 8 years ago, a wonderful family that treated us well. In no way do I oppose their attempts to develop this property. Overall, I view the addition to have a positive impact in our area. However, my concern is drainage. As president of the Bluffs at Spring Creek HOA, we just completed a major road replacement project. This was approximately a $500,000 project that included removing the asphalt, removing the roadbed, drain tiling the south ditch, and then replacing the roadbed and road. As you may or may not be aware, there are multiple springs in and around our area. The drainage easement that runs south to north through the property and my neighbor's properties has rarely been dry in the 8 years we have resided there. The subject property that Schwartzley and Long are proposing developed as a wetland property. It too has rarely been dry in the 8 years we have lived in the neighborhood. I noted that the developer's plans include a retention pond in the northwest corner of the property, which I presume will be drained somehow and somewhere. Again, I'm not opposed to the development of the property. I'm not opposed to the retention ponding of the water. What I am opposed to is the contractor and developer being allowed to simply discharge this water into our neighboring development to the north without consideration or regard to possible improvements to handle such discharge. I further noted that your planning commission has taken this issue up, and I believe waiting for the contractor developer to further address this issue. I trust and assume this is and will be handled in a way that does not negatively impact the bluffs at Spring Creek HOA, both corporately and personally. Respectfully submitted, Jason S. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Toby. All right, if there's no other opposition, I think we'll ask the owner and/or engineer to come up and address some of the questions we had. Okay. All right, gentlemen, I'll start with the culvert going across north of 106. Is any intentions to utilize that or make it bigger, or how will that work into your plan?
The existing culvert is a 24-inch culvert, and we wouldn't do anything. We wouldn't touch it. We wouldn't alter it at all. We would have a control structure in front of it to control our discharge. So right now, we were planning to reduce the peak flow rates. I'll leave it up to John to address if he would like to keep them the same or
Well, we had one neighbor
respond to.
We had one
the
neighbor have
request.
concerns that his pond was gonna be dry because we're gonna reduce the water, and then we had another neighbor concerned that we're gonna flood the area. I think Pat's shown, I think Pat's shown that, he's reduced the flow of the water problem out there. So I really don't understand the conflict there, but, we don't have any intentions of increasing the size of the culvert. To discharge more water, our intention is to discharge less and to help the neighbors, not make it worse.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions regarding that?
What about the access? The question about the access to the addition, did that get answered?
No.
Not yet, no.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, if you can address that, that'd be
I
fine.
was just talking to my partner Gib and to Pat, and we're okay with not attaching our subdivision to the existing subdivision. If that's something that they desire, then we're totally fine with that.
I think one of the other questions that what we're getting back was the driveway. Where's the access point
To the subdivision itself?
to the subdivision itself?
Is that what we were talking about?
Uh,
Oh, it's, go ahead, Pat.
The access road into the subdivision would line up directly across from the existing Prairie Hills Trail to the north.
Mhm.
So it'd be a four-legged intersection. That's one access point, and we propose to have another one further to the east. There you go. So the west one lines up with the aforementioned road, and then the further one to the east, Veda Avenue. And then at some point, I don't know if you're gonna ask me more questions about the drainage, but I'd like to respond just a little bit to the gentleman, the farmer, or the landowner there. So we totally agree that drainage
Excuse
is
me, Pat.
key.
Just a second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No?
I
Yep,
think
no, just a
There's
couple,
two more
let's,
questions.
Oh, to you.
let's concentrate on
Oh,
the
Sorry.
access a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
Mr. Scott?
And I think the fellow had two, there was a couple more questions about your pond. Were you, I think it was, if it goes dry, are you guys gonna fill it back up or keep it full? or
to
is
have
it-
a well, no,
Yeah.
we don't plan on maintaining the water level. I mean, really, these ponds are designed to control the water.
Okay,
So we're not gonna maintain the water level. And as far as I think it was mosquitoes.
Yeah, the other gentleman had a
fish
question
control
about that.
mosquitoes. So we plan on having aerators and some fountains in these lakes, and then, have some fish.
okay. And then Mr. Elbers had a question on the southeast pond. Where is that gonna go when it runs over?
That discharges to the east,
To the east? Okay.
to the east.
All right, I think that was all the questions, Commissioner, or Chairman.
That's all I can think of.
If I may,
Yes.
John, there's been some discussion, I know it wasn't really phrased as a question about Harrisburg annexing this area. Is there a can you take us through your thought process of why you would rather do this as a rural residential development through the county versus approaching the Harrisburg city?
Well, I think that the city of Harrisburg probably wouldn't allow 1-acre lots. We want to have 1-acre lots. We want people to not, maybe they don't want to live in the city. That gives people a choice out in the country. We think this provides, a better quality of living.
Have you had any discussions with the city of Harrisburg?
We haven't.
All right, I think that's all the questions we had. No, all right, thank you, guys.
You're welcome. I wanted to point out that the drainage going to the south, there won't be drainage going to the south from these houses and these lots. It'll drain to the east to the detention pond. So there'll be a ditch back there by design. And so it's intended to take all of that runoff and all of that stormwater east to the detention pond.
Just a side note, Harrisburg doesn't.
Thank you, Pat. All right, so we've had speakers in favor and opposition, and everyone said their piece, so I'll ask for a motion so we can discuss.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the rezone.
I'll second for discussion.
For discussion, thank you. We have a motion and second. All right, commissioners, let's have our conversation.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would just start by saying I think I get a feel for maybe where the rest of the committee's going here, but at the same time with the residential development to the north and directly to the east, I don't think it's, even if it's not in line with our plan from 1995, I don't necessarily think it's something that doesn't fit that area.
Is that it?
That's all I have.
Okay. So, reading through the comprehensive plan, it specifically states to be careful of more rural development, basically because of its effect on agriculture. And I think that's one of the things that, on ag land, and I think that's one of the, probably been the main discussion tonight, right? And it points to keeping these developments more towards our municipalities or within our municipalities because they're able to handle this type of development through storm sewers and roads, law enforcement, fire, traffic. They're designed for those types of things. We aren't necessarily designed and prepared for them out in the middle of townships. It creates a whole new sort of issues, I guess you could say. And even though we have, Lincoln County has done this in the past, I get that. But that doesn't necessarily mean, that we just continue to keep making the same mistakes over and over. And one of the things with drainage that I think is kind of interesting because I've spent a lot of time working in the Harrisburg and T area, and I've seen how these things have affected ag land, and I'll agree with Mr. Albers that every time you do this, it has an immediate effect on adjoining land. It just does. And we already have, admittedly, water problems in the development to the north and water problems in the development to the east. And for some reason, we don't think we're going to have water problems in this development. My own personal bias on this would be is wait till the city of Harrisburg gets there and let them deal with it in the way of proper roads, proper drainage through storm sewers, proper traffic control. I mean, we've got two developments here that don't even want to adjoin roads. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense and creates more traffic problems. So I think we have to be careful as a county just to continue to plop down little residential districts that don't want to, they want to be individual, but yet they kind of don't want to be. And I think we have to be careful and cognizant of that, especially when we have municipalities already, you know, some really good ones in this county that are prepared for this type of growth and development.
Thank you. Other commissioners?
I just agree 100% with the fact that, I mean, Harrisburg's going to get there. I full well know that. I'm at a meeting every month and I'm updated weekly. We're going to get there. And there are going to be a lot of different requirements and a lot of different things in the sewer, in the water, and it just needs to be taken care of differently, I think, and knowing that there is water issues already that obviously aren't even really been taken care of. I mean, do we really want to take the chance of adding two more water issues to other folks or to the people that you're building homes for? I just don't think that's something that we should take that chance on.
Thank you, Commissioner Hogan. Colin, Mr. Poppins?
I think everyone, I think everyone's heard me pretty loud and clear in the last few meetings. You know, we have done this in the past. Doesn't mean we need to continue to do it the same way in the future. We have better technology. We need to do it better. We have municipalities that are able to handle this type of growth and everything that goes along with it. So whenever possible, we should encourage that growth to be in the municipalities. So that's simply that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Instead?
No, everything's been covered. I have nothing else to add.
I'm a fan of municipalities. I kind of feel the same way, so. All right, any other discussion, or I'll take roll call. All right. Commissioner Instead?
No.
Commissioner Hogan?
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins?
No.
Commissioner Scott?
No.
I'll vote no also. Thank you. Toby?
Okay, this next item is a conditional use permit for an agriculture-related operation, specifically seed sales. This subject property is just to the, in between Lenox and Worthing, but I'll say it's closer. It's about 2.7 miles to the east of the city of Lenox. Applicant for this is David Cooper. If you do recall, we did, I believe, a couple months ago, approve a conditional use permit for seed sales just to the east of this property for Mr. Cooper. The landowner, Mr. Cooper, I believe, weren't able to come to an agreement on the finality part of it, and so he's now going to a different site for this application. Subject property is a proposal. The applicant's proposing to purchase approximately 5 to 10 acres of the subject property. Purpose again of this would be for seed sales. As noted in the staff analysis, staff does note that this request is in conformance with the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance and the conditions as such. Staff does recommend approval of this application as conditioned in the staff report, which I'll pull up right now. I have had a chance to talk to the applicant, and I believe he has reviewed all of the conditions of the staff recommendations, and I believe he is in concurrence with those. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Is there any changes to the application other than the location of what he proposes to do?
None.
Thank
No
you.
changes to the operation, no.
All right, seeing no other questions for staff, I'll ask the applicant to come forward and speak on their proposal.
David Cooper, 28137 464th Avenue, Lenox, South Dakota. We purchased a couple of seed dealerships of Pioneer here over the previous year. And family is trying to combine the two dealerships in an area that would centralize our sales for Pioneer. So we're looking to put up a roughly 19,000 square foot building for this location that roughly, 6-7 acres, depending on the conditions of this meeting. So purchasing the land from Kurt Snyderman, and guess it's open for questions. Like I said, we're with Toby, nothing's changed as far as making any new plans or anything. It was just one of those deals where the past applicant that we was, or landowner that we was trying to buy with, decided that he didn't care to do it because of increase of land prices. So that's kind of why that fell through. So we're here again to try another application, so.
Right.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Cooper?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I do, Mr. Cooper.
Hello.
Have you had a chance to visit with any neighbors coming before us, before this meeting?
I guess Kenny and Kathy Lukes live to the west, maybe not quite 3/4 of a mile. Half mile to the east, have not heard anything from them. The owner that is a half mile to the north on the east side of the road, nothing from anybody, so.
Okay.
Just,
And,
I don't know, that's always open to,
well,
questions.
I guess we'll find out here in a little bit. I was just curious if you had a chance to
no,
visit with them.
I personally have not had anybody ask on that part, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? No? All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, at this time, I would ask anyone that'd like to speak in favor of the applicant to come forward and discuss. All right, seeing none, I will ask anybody in opposition to the application to come forward. Okay, seeing none. I will close the floor to public comment, and I'll ask a motion from the commission so we can discuss.
I'll make a motion to approve, Scott.
I'll second that instead.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Commissioners, are there any discussion? All right, seeing none.
Just for clarification, were there any stipulations from staff or recommendations from staff?
Yes.
And your motion would include?
My
all of those?
motion would include those.
Very good.
And I'll quickly ask Mr. Cooper, you read the conditions and you don't have any issues? Sure.
I have one question about the,
No, he's got to go.
Now he's got to go.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So there was one stipulation on the lighting. I just want to make sure this is a business if, we can have night light for, security wise, is that okay or?
Yeah, we just want to cover downcast. That's what
Down lighting.
Oh, yeah, but I meant for security wise is what I would ask, so.
Yes, it's more of a, Toby, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of a directional lighting
Okay.
control, so it doesn't just emit
Oh, no,
everywhere.
no.
It keeps it onto the property.
No,
Is that
no.
correct, Toby? Thank you.
Correct.
Yep, that's the only one, so just want to make sure that it's secure that way yet, so,
Right,
thank you.
thank you.
Yep.
All right, commissioners, any further discussion? All right, with that, I'll take roll call. Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. Good luck. Second time's a charm.
Third time.
Third time's.
Third time. We're not counting though.
Poor
We keep
guy.
racking in those fees.
All right, Mr. Brown, next, please.
Okay, this next application is a request for a conditional use permit for warehousing, specifically outdoor storage. The applicant for this item is Porter Investments LLP, and this property is approximately 650 feet to the east of the city of Tees corporate city limits. Subject parcel is approximately 1.22 acres in size. As you can see, the subject property is one of the last undeveloped parcels in this particular light industrial park. The applicant included in the application that the intent is to have outdoor storage or warehousing specifically on the property for primarily RVs. The applicant did note in the application that they intend to have some security fencing around the property and then also some security measures in place, which is of course a condition that we typically attach to it. Staff has reviewed the application and has gone through the staff analysis and the attached staff report. Staff does feel that this application is in conformance with the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. Staff does recommend approval of this application, subject to the conditions that were identified in the staff report, which I'll put on the screen now. With that, be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Commissioners, any questions?
Clarification if I could, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
please.
Is this just for the vacant parcel?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question also, Toby. Number 8, it says, except for the storage of RVs, campers, and automobiles, no other storage unit or material can be on site. I mean, is there boats and trailers? I mean, no, it's not particularly listed, but if they put a store a boat out there, is that against?
No, that would meet our definition for an automobile or a
Okay.
vehicle. Yeah, and so what we typically is we just don't want to see other types of materials that accumulate on the site.
Right, landscaping, rock, or whatever it would be.
Correct.
Right.
Anything other than what I would call vehicles on the property. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, there's no further questions for staff. I will ask the owner applicant to come forward and talk a little bit more about their proposal.
My name is Walter Ports. I am at 6009 South Sundowner Avenue. First of all, thank you guys all for being here and volunteering your time. My dad did it for a long time. It's kind of interesting to be up here and on the other side of it. So basically what we're running into, we own the storage facility down at 69th and Sundowner. And this last year, obviously the demand for RV storage has increased substantially. And a lot of people are having a lot of trouble finding where to go. So we are in the process of purchasing the Landreth Body Shop and the land adjacent to the north, which is what we're talking about here, with the idea that we can add on to our storage business. We own another storage sheds over on Katy Avenue, which is a couple blocks to the west of this location. And we try and keep a real nice, tidy ship running and keep it clean and secure for all of our tenants. We plan to put in cameras, lighting, secured gates, kind of the whole gamut to make sure that we're covering all of our bases, because for us, if something happens, like, that's not ideal. You want things to be secure. So my only question for the staff would be, you know, that I understand the want for it to look clean by putting the slats in, but actually that decreases security in our experience. Anywhere where there's no visibility is where we're more likely to see a problem. So I'll do whatever they want me to do. I don't care either way, but for me, like, that's actually a detriment to the security of the location. But other than that, everything that they recommended, I see works perfectly for what we're trying to do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask anyone to come up and speak in favor of the application. Seeing none. Anyone like speak in opposition? Seeing none. Okay, I'll close the floor to public comment, and I'll ask for a motion from the commission.
Toby, can I just ask, with him asking about the fencing, is he going to need to do those slats, or can he just maybe landscaping around it, or we definitely want those slats in it for the siding wise?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a condition that we've been adding typically now, is that we do opaque on the fences and things
Okay.
like that. Don't
Okay.
disagree with security portion of it though, so if the board wants to modify that condition, you know, but it's up to you guys on that part of it.
I think we should have Toby visit with our sheriff and maybe see if that's some wisdom into removing that opaque requirement. But our previous rezones or conditional use permits have included putting the slats in, so I would recommend that we continue with that unless we have a defined reason to change it, so. With that, I would move to approve with the stipulations and conditions.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion second with stipulations. Any discussion, commissioners? All right, I'll take roll call. Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. Congratulations, thank you. All right, Mr. Brown, next, please.
Okay, this next item is an application for a preliminary subdivision plan that's for the Long Creek Meadow Estates at Spring Creek addition. This is corresponding to the previous application for the rezone of the subject property. So again, the subject property is approximately 3.5 miles northeast of the city of Harrisburg. And the applicant for this is John Schwartzley, or the Schwartzley Company. Again, subject parcel is approximately 43.22 acres in size. Again, the subdivision would be the Long Meadows Estates at Spring Creek addition. The proposed purpose would be 29 single-family residential lots. As you can see in the staff report, staff does recommend approval, however conditional on the comments that staff identified that those be corrected prior to the Board of Commissioners meeting. And so I'll kind of jump. I know we've talked a lot about the drainage and some of those things, but what they've proposed with this application is a preliminary subdivision plan. And the preliminary subdivision plan is really a broad stroke of essentially lot and block layout. They have presented, and I haven't had our engineer review their latest submittals on the drainage yet, but what I would tell you is that their primary requirement right now is that they identify the current flow of the property for drainage, and they identify if there's any potential detention holding ponds. They're not required to do a full drainage analysis until it gets to the final development plan phase. The final development phase does not go before the Planning Commission or the Board of Commissioners. It's strictly in-house with staff, and there are specific requirements in the ordinance that staff reviews along with our consultants to review it. So I know the main question that everyone has is about the drainage portion of this. That won't be addressed in a public forum. That'll be addressed through the submittal process with staff. However, most of the requirements were met for the preliminary plan. I identified in the staff reports those items that have not been done. I believe those can be correctable and can be met and resubmitted so that they can be submitted to the Board of Commissioners. Again, with that, though, staff does recommend approval. And so I know this comes up quite, it happened last month, but you're going to say, well, are we going to approve this application even though we've just recommended denial of the rezoning application? I would treat this as kind of a separate application and say that staff feels that this does meet the requirements for the preliminary subdivision plan. When it gets to the Board of Commissioners stage, if If they deny the application for rezone, then at that time, we would request that they would also deny then the preliminary plan at that stage because there wouldn't be a purpose for it. But again, you're just a recommending body to the Board of Commissioners. We don't know at this stage if they will approve or deny the application. So again, staff would recommend approval of this preliminary plan application because it does meet the standards. Any questions for staff at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
So Toby, you're recommending approval based on that it meets the standards for rural subdivisions,
For preliminary plans.
per preliminary plan subdivision, that's it.
Yep.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Brown? Commissioner Poppins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one question I have is the Meadowlark court access. Do you have any comment at this time concerning whether we should continue with that access into the existing development or if that should be terminated?
I guess I'll ask the Planning Commission's thoughts on that. You know, from a staff perspective, we would, you know, our engineer recommends that we always have, a minimum ingress egress of 2 areas, which this one would, but they're both to the north, you know. So for emergency purpose and things like that, we try to encourage that there be some additional ingress and egress off of a separate roadway.
My personal opinion would be is that it should remain because for that purpose and a couple others, but just for fire trucks or whatever, emergency vehicles getting access to an area, the more access in or out, the better. I was in a development in Sioux Falls this morning, and there must be 300 homes in there, and they have one, and they're just waiting for the municipality that will be added, but it's they have a congestion just trying to get in and out of that development, and it's not a safe situation if they had an issue, a fire or something up in there. So.
All right, there's no further questions. I will ask the applicant come forward and discuss their proposal for this preliminary plan.
Well, once again, we'd like to do a 29 lot.
Will you say your name?
Oh,
For the
excuse me.
record, please, John. Thank you.
John Schwartzley. You want my address? 27313 Jordan Drive, T.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Commissioner. So we're proposing to do a 29 lot subdivision adjacent to the Long subdivision out at Spring Creek. Like I said before, basically 29 homes with 2 detention ponds. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Schwartzley? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, at this time, I would ask anyone that'd like to speak in favor of the application come forward. All right, seeing none, I will ask anyone that can speak in opposition of the application come forward, please.
Craig Morris, 47979 Meadowlark Street, just to the east. I just have a question. I'm not sure if this was addressed before or not, but are there going to be any street lights on any of those streets? Only question.
Okay, we'll find out for you, Greg. Thank you. All right, anybody else like to speak in opposition of the application? No, okay. Mr. Schwartzley, could you let us know if there's going to be any streetlights?
We don't have any planned at this time, but we have considered it.
Okay. Thank you. All right, if there's no other public input, I will close the floor to discussion and ask for a motion from commission.
Just 1 second. You brought good.
Does the other subdivisions have streetlights?
They don't, no.
Okay.
All right, with that, I'll ask for a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the preliminary subdivision plan.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, commissioners? No, I am seeing none. With that, I'll take roll call. Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Jerry's gonna vote no also. Commissioner Jungling, sorry, I said that out of order. Kind of weird to say it myself. All right, with that, thank you. Mr. Brown, next.
Okay, this next application is for a preliminary subdivision plan for La Valley Business Park Edition Phase 2. The applicant for this item is Dennis Klinghagen. This application is for the subject property just about approximately a mile southwest of the city of Harrisburg. This would just be a recent annexation from the city of Harrisburg is annexed out to Louise Avenue, so this would be kind of as the crow flies from that area there. Subject property is approximately 7.44 acres in size. This again would be phase 2 because Dennis has developed La Valley Business Park Phase 1. This subject property has been previously rezoned to C commercial. Dennis does live on the property directly to the west of this subject property. Application identified that the applicant would be subdividing the 7.44 acres into 7 lots for future commercial development of properties. Staff analysis is for approval of this application. Again, conditional on some of the staff comments being addressed prior to it being brought to the Board of Commissioners. This was the preliminary plan that was submitted with the application. And again, I'll be real brief, but the preliminary plan is just a basic lot and block layout. The only drainage requirement that we have to be met is that they show what the proposed drainage flows are and if they intend to put any detention ponds on the property. That has been met. And again, further engineering will be reviewed throughout the process with the development engineering plans. So again, staff does recommend approval of this. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, I will ask the applicant come forward and discuss their proposal.
Dennis Klinghagen, 47102 Homefield Place, Harrisburg. This is the last 7 acres that I have available to finish this park out. I started this over a couple of years ago, but the way things went, I had to back off a little bit on it, so. I don't know, what else do you?
Yep, whatever information you'd like to share with us.
Well, it's mostly high ground. There is a small area of wetlands down there, but there's never water. That's all been drained years ago. That water goes south to northeast corner of that lot. Goes into 9 Mile Creek. That's the divide there, a continental divide, you might say. That wetlands will be established there. That's met. It's still there. It's still there. It will be kept there.
Okay.
You're not gonna mitigate it off the property?
No. I had plans to, but I got stopped in a hurry on that.
Okay, Commissioner, any questions for Dennis? right, I'm seeing none. Thank you. Yeah, I think we'll ask anyone that'd like to speak in favor of the application to come forward. All right, anyone like to speak in opposition of the application, come forward. Seeing none, I will close the floor to public comment, and I will ask for a motion from the commission so we can discuss.
I'll make a motion to approve. Scott?
Second, Poppins.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, commissioners? All right, I'm seeing none. I will take roll call. Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. Thank you. Good luck. All right, Mr. Brown, you're up.
Okay, this next item is an application for our preliminary subdivision plan for Peters Edition. The applicant and owner of the property is Richard Peters. Subject property is approximately 1.8 miles to the west of the city of T. Subject property is currently zoned rural residential, and I believe that went through the process just recently on that part. The applicant has submitted a preliminary plan identifying approximately 12 lots on the property. If I can get to that part there. Staff did, along with IMEG, who's formerly Clark, is our county engineer, works on this. We did meet with the applicant and their consultants. Did have some comments that we walked through with the applicant. First and foremost, so I'll go through a couple things on it that's a little unique to this. So the proposed access to the property would not be platted. It would be an easement that would be on the property. And so it is identified in our subdivision ordinance that this would be allowed. We've never done it before in Lincoln County. This would be the first time that we would do it. And so essentially, all lots, there wouldn't be a dedicated right-of-way. All lots would just, would be full lots, and there would be an easement running across it. The road would have to be improved by the developer to specifications prior to us, the county platting lots on the property. But what you would typically see then on the parcel browser for Lincoln County is you would see a line that would follow essentially the property line. But it wouldn't be recognizable as essentially as a road because it wouldn't have a right-of-way associated with it. When we did have the Kathy Kruger property that was in the joint jurisdictional area within the last year and a half, the City of Sioux Falls staff did discuss that as an option because essentially the issues that happen is, which happens in all subdivisions, is who maintains the roads, who takes care of the roads, and then what if we don't want to do anything with the roads, what happens? In this particular case, the issue would be is that this would all be owned by individual property owners. It wouldn't be a group governing process. The applicants identified that they would submit a homeowners association agreement, which would be the overriding thing. But the framework would be as each individual party or property owner would have their own ownership of that road. And so we did discuss some potential concerns that might raise. However, just because we've never done it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, I guess. But along with that, it does create some responsibilities that we typically don't have on individual lot owners within rural residential developments. And saying not for or against that, essentially it's up to the boards how they want to handle that. The next item is that as far as access, there's a concern that the ordinance requires that the length of a subdivision or the length of a cul-de-sac not exceed 500 feet. In this case, this proposal does. And so the concern would be is can we get additional access into there or change it so that we don't have that? And one of the options was that our engineer recommended was to go access across Lot 12, or another option would be is to extend to the subdivision, proposed subdivision to the east, or to change the main access that currently is the access for Mr. Peters' residence, which is shown to the north, to combine those access points. And I'll let him and his consultant talk more a little bit about that part of it. So there is some, I didn't go into detail on that with the other ones because those were more just kind of things that need to be corrected on the plans. This is a little bit more substantial type things that could affect lot and block layout of the development. And so how this works is that the preliminary plan gets recommended and approved by the Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners. If there's any substantial changes to that approval, then we have to go back through the process. So one thing that I've encouraged the applicant is we don't want to essentially, again, redo this again because of some of these changes. So I'll let them talk a little bit more about that. But at this time, staff does recommend approval of the submittal. It does meet the preliminary or the subdivision criteria for approval. And direct any questions or concerns that those things that I've addressed to the applicant and their consultant. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, do you have any question for staff?
Comment, I guess I'm gonna, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Chobe, thank you for your diligence on this. Is definitely not a run-of-the-mill application for, the most striking thing to me that is the length of the cul-de-sac. Even with the situation that we've gone in the past where we've scrutinized the length of cul-de-sacs, you as a staff is still recommending approval of this cul-de-sac, the length of the road to the cul-de-sac.
No, that staff would recommend that be addressed.
Okay, so then you're not recommending as it's presented. I just want clarification, because this has been a pretty significant issue over the years.
Yes, so I discussed with the applicant the idea that we would table this item, but we had previously scheduled a public hearing for this and had some of these issues. Ultimately, the decision to what I would say variance the cul-de-sac is up to the boards. And so I encouraged the applicant to come to this meeting to discuss that with you, to get some feedback from you. And ultimately, what might be a result is we might end up tabling this item tonight based on the discussion that you have with the applicant, and then coming back next month with maybe revised set plans.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
All right, commissioners, or any other questions for Mr. Brown?
I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I mean, we just went through this discussion with the one up by Spring Creek. I guess I still have a lot of the same concerns, and I understand that this land's already been rezoned for this. Is that, do you share any of the same concerns, Toby, that you had with the recommended denial of the first one that you would this, or is it because it's already rezoned? Is that, and we're working on the plan? Is that what you're more recommending approval on?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, so easements, and then you said it'd be up to the homeowners association to take care of the road. Does the county have any enforcement on homeowners association rules? Say they all decide to stop doing it, the road goes bad, the county have any say on, you have to maintain this or anything like that?
No. But, then the opposing argument would be is that this would probably put more emphasis on those landowners maintaining the road. What we've seen and when we dedicate right-of-way is at some point there's a question, well, who owns the road and who's responsible for it? And then there's also certain, it's not really consistent across the county, are we paying taxes on this as an ownership and things like this? This takes away all of those arguments, but it creates arguments for those particular homeowners as well. But from the county standpoint, we don't maintain these roads. We're not gonna improve these roads. They're essentially dedicated for public access, essentially where they're at.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
unique to what we're doing, but there is advantages and disadvantages to both sides of it. I think first and foremost, though, the road would be built, the road would be designed and built according to our standards. From that point on, though, the individual ownership would be up to those property owners.
Just for clarification, Toby, you said it would be for public access? It would not be for, if it's not a right-of-way?
Private road, yes.
It would be a private road.
Yes.
How would that, police department or sheriff's department access?
Those are all questions that you can ask the applicant and their
Okay.
consultant.
All right, thank you.
Those were raised, I guess, at the meeting that we had with them too, so.
All right, very good.
All
Mr.
right.
Brown, you maybe suggested an exit route through Lot 12. So would that road run like the border of Lot 9 and 11 and exit through to, there is a road there?
No, there's not proposed. It would essentially kind of go like through here, would access here, because they are per the, so I should say, and they'll bring this up a little more in detail. The other issue we have is that, this was a state road that's now a county road. And so our county highway superintendent has spacing requirements as far as where those accesses can be. And so that's also created kind of a problem for us in trying to make sure that there's multiple accesses and those different types of things. This proposed access that our engineer proposed would go along here and through here. There's a wetland that exists here. That creates some problems to mitigate and to do some of those different types of things, as well as it's wet. The other option is this property here we will see, in fact, I just received an application for a preliminary plan for this property. And this is a major subdivision to the east. One of the things we recommend, is much like tonight, is to work with those property owners to create access, ingress, egress through that. They have visited, and I visited with the consultant on that property as well, and from what I understand, it really sounded like they didn't have any plans to do that it was just essentially going to be contained development on the east and the proposed on the west. So, but not to say you as a board you could say our stipulation that approval of that is we want those to work two parties to work together, whatever direction it is that we would like to proceed.
All right. Any other discussion with staff?
Just for the record, I do want to place on the record that I at one time owned the parcel that he just referred to. I had financial interest in it. I no longer have financial interest in that parcel that he just spoke of, so for the record.
Thank you. All right, with that, if there's no other discussion, I'll ask the applicant come forward and tell us a little bit more.
Richard Peters, 27228 South Dakota Highway 17T. We've owned this property for, I don't know, 25, 26 years. And with the development half mile east and then the proposed development abutting our property, it just made sense that we would look at developing this as well. And some of the issues, I guess, that are coming up, I was trying to be proactive in this, and instead of having it passed and then going to the highway department to get our drive and have them say, well, no, you can't put a drive there. I thought, well, let's figure this out up front, and that's why this was planned using our existing drive, which then makes the length of that a little longer than what you would like to see. But, you know, just with the lay of the land, I guess we're running into some issues and open for suggestion. We want to do it right. We want to do it right the first time. We don't want to have to come back and keep coming back and, you know, we just want to get it figured out and do it right.
All right. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Peters?
Any comment concerning the type of road as being not a right-of-way that you'd like to address that?
Honestly, that might be better suited to Scott.
Okay.
Would you be opposed at all to adding some kind of condition that you guys make a connecting road to the east that could potentially hook up with the new development for access going out that way?
So we've talked about this proposed development for a couple of years. COVID kind of put a pause on everything. And both, I guess, in visiting with previous landowner to the east and current landowner to the east, not getting a lot of feedback that they would like to connect. I guess I see both advantages and disadvantages to connecting, but I wouldn't be opposed either way.
Okay. Because I guess the thing I look at, and as we discussed earlier, I mean, and you guys are even closer to T. You know, I mean, as the municipality moves out there, I think that as we have all these subdivisions that aren't connected, eventually are going to have to get connected. It's going to create problems. So if we could foresight that and think 5-10 years down the road and start to develop some of those connections, I think would make the most sense. And maybe we need to start thinking about that a little bit, as Mr. Brown had suggested that we could. So, but you guys wouldn't be opposed to
I guess not
a
opposed
connection
to
that way.
communication
Okay.
regarding that.
Very good, thanks.
Scott Lavoie from DTR Engineering, Dick's consultant. To address the question on the mutual access agreement, really, again, this isn't really a deal breaker one way or another, but one thing that we've noticed in a lot of situations, and I think Toby kind of hit most of this, is there's been a lot of these rural residential properties, not necessarily locally here, but we do work all over the state and have run across quite a few instances where it's a question of who's actually going to maintain the road. The mutual access agreement, mutual access and utility easement is what we call it. There's really no question of who's taking care of that road with that in place. That's essentially the crux of what that's about.
Mr. Bobbins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that explanation, but I do need to have some better understanding. I've not seen this before, not locally here. There's a couple developments in Sioux Falls, and this doesn't work very well in Sioux Falls at times either. So individual has that ownership of the road, but what mechanism actually forces them to make an improvement if they choose not to make an improvement?
Well, again, they have a...
Because there's no taxing authority of the development when it's not a right-of-way. No, because a road district, can a road district operate on that type of a road without a right-of-way?
It's the same principle as a road district. I mean, it's exact.
It'll have taxing authority on a non-public right-of-way?
I believe so, yes.
You're not sure, though?
I'm not 100% on that.
Okay. And how about access for sheriff department, fire department?
That would all be written into the covenants. There's absolutely no reason we couldn't have that written into the covenants to allow that.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak
not
off the
necessarily
cuff right now. Given we don't have this anywhere else, just for the simplicity of keeping unified, I would probably look to try to keep it with a right-of-way situation. But that's just me at this not understanding, and maybe we can have more conversation on
Sure.
why this might be a better option than what we've seen in the past, but.
Sure. Again, we're not entirely opposed to doing right away. It's just we've had some recent run-ins where a situation like this could possibly work better.
Yeah, I think we've seen some issues in the past in Lincoln County where people were reluctant, but with property values increasing substantially, that reluctance is, I think, how fast can we get these roads to be in better shape, because it definitely affects their property values locally.
Can you give us an instance where it has been a problem, or give us just kind of a scenario where it doesn't?
85th Street in Sioux Falls and Hanson Place, I'll give you an example of that particular road. It's dedicated public right-of-way, and it's a no man's land. Nobody will claim ownership of that right-of-way, and nobody will maintain it. If you drive by there, there's actually people that built gates across the road because they don't want people driving on it, because they don't want to maintain they don't want to maintain it because it's a public right of way, but the county township, I'm not sure who's nobody will claim jurisdiction over this.
Where's 85th and Hanson? East side, west side?
Over by tall grass, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So just a unique situation we've run across very recently.
So, but like in this scenario, I'm assuming this is,
A little bit different
the
situation.
landowner owns to the middle of the road, correct?
Yep, just like a township.
Just like a
road in the country.
township.
Yep.
But in the townships, pay taxes to the township maintains the road, so who maintains this road then? Does the association do it?
Correct.
So they pay into the association runs
Yes,
it?
that's correct.
Makes sense.
Yep, just like an HOA or road district, same type of setup. And again, we're not gonna fall on our sword over this particular
Yeah, no, I think
issue.
you're just trying to help us understand, I think,
Yep.
more than anything, yeah.
Yep.
Can you give an example where this has worked extremely well?
I know there's a lot of places up by Lake Madison, for example. They have a lot of road districts up there where there's
Where it's a private road, not a right-of-way?
correct. Yep. Lots of places out in the hills have this situation. There's lots of rural developments out in the mountains and whatnot. They
So do
a
you
lot of
know
this.
then, I mean, from a taxing standpoint, then on the property tax, that goes to the county, then does the county kick back the money to the association, or is it just a separate, does the homeowner have to send a separate check into the association for that portion?
Again, it would work just like any other HOA that you've seen anywhere else where they just pay dues to the association.
To the association, okay. But if they don't, but there again, if they decide they don't want to, there isn't a real authority or governing body over it. I'm just trying to understand. I'm not trying to pick on your project. I'm just
No.
trying to get a better idea of it.
It's you own the land, so you take care of your land. It's kind of one of them deals, I guess.
Same token, we still own to the middle of the road on a right-of-way too, and if you want the ditch cleaned up, you go clean it up yourself too, because the township isn't coming to do it.
Right.
So I think it's a possibility that it might be a little bit better, but there might also be a possibility there's different things. I think the biggest thing is making sure the road district and or the association set up properly under either mechanism to make sure that the road is maintained and the property is taken care of, so.
Again, not going to fall on the sword in this issue.
Sure. I think the bigger issue is probably the length of the cul-de-sac and having only one
Agreed.
access. So.
Agreed. And I will, if I may, could I comment on that just a little bit?
Please.
Just so everybody's understanding why it's like that, I'm not sure that was conveyed 100%. There's 5 accesses currently on the east side of this mile, and that's the limit. But none of those 5 serve this area. They don't benefit this particular property. So with only one access, I mean, Dick is basically in this particular layout, he'd be sharing his driveway that he currently has to that property. as the access point for the, for the development. That's not ideal by any means, and I'm sure Dick would like to have his driveway back to himself, but this is the solution that we had. We either had to have a long cul-de-sac, or you have, or somebody's got to give an extra access. That's kind of the pickle that we're in with this. It's got to be one or the other, and there's some topographic constraints, as Toby mentioned, with going between Lot 9 and Lot 12. There's a wetland that goes between the lot lines that you can't really see that great on the map that's shown currently, but I think if we put a road there, I mean, I think we're looking at some pretty substantial additional costs that may make this development not worth it necessarily for Dick to do this. In addition, that driveway that we have proposed on the very south, there's a driveway proposed on the very south edge. Sorry, this thing is rotated.
Yeah, it should
North
be-
is to the left.
Yeah. Yeah.
The southwest corner, there's a access that's shown on the south property line that would be proposed as a shared access with the property to the south. And in discussions with the county highway superintendent, they'd certainly consider doing that as an access because it's at the quarter-mile mark. There's already an existing driveway on the opposite side of the road is that, and in addition, the farmer that lives that farms the south, the property to the south of there, currently doesn't have an access to that field. He drives through the ditch essentially to farm that property.
That's where again? Where did you say that's on the south
So
side
look
by
in
lot
the-
11?
Be on the half-mile line, right on 17 there.
Oh,
Just south
still
of,
on 17.
yeah,
Still
just
on
south of
17.
those storage units, just north of Doug Vanderwerf's place there.
Yeah, so Doug Vandenberg is the one that farms the land to the south of Dick's place here.
Yep.
Is there?
And you've talked, not to interrupt, but you've talked to Doug about this, and he's all right with that?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna, I mean, there isn't, I mean, I know how the lots are drawn and where the wetland is, but there's nothing on the south for an out that way. That's what you're saying would be too cumbersome to,
I'm saying if you were to come, as Toby mentioned, Kevin Goff had suggested coming around, making essentially a horseshoe pattern, coming from, on the north side, you got Dick's driveway on the north end, basically making a loop, a horseshoe that would come out on the access that we have proposed on the south end. There's some topographic constraints with doing that with the wetland. If I may, just run up to the board here quick. That area right there is all wetland.
So like lot 12 really isn't gonna be a lot then?
Well, it'll have wetland in the backyard, but
Okay.
there's some buildable land
I guess I
adjacent
haven't
to the
paid,
road.
so what, with this plan, what would your current access to lot 12 be? Just
Off the road. which
off
is-
the road, so
which-
you'd have an access to lot 12, and then this other access would access everything else?
Correct, but the other access is currently already there. We're not
Right.
putting a new access there.
Right, that's his driveway.
Yep.
Yep.
And again, this wasn't our first choice, but that's what we're able to do.
you couldn't make an exit on the east side of the wetland going kinda through lot 11?
We don't own the land to the south of us. Is it-
Oh, I'm sorry, that's not a road.
Nope.
I'm sorry,
Quite-
I thought that was a mile road.
Half mile.
Okay.
No, it's a agricultural field
Yep,
right to
I'm
the
sorry.
south.
Yeah, because there's already 5.
Question.
So they can't.
Did you actually have a wetland determination made by the Corps?
Kind of wanted to see how this went first. We did have conversations with Nathan Lund, who's does wetland delineations, and from his desktop delineation, he said, yes, absolutely, they're wetlands. Whether or not they're jurisdictional, that's the other question.
Hey, Dick. So you know my property that I used to have over there? That one on the very northeast corner?
Mhm.
Not a wetland, not jurisdictional. So I would recommend getting your determination quickly before the rules change. Not, that's just a politely suggestion.
Sure, appreciate that.
Good.
Because that is much more of a substantial wetland than what this one is.
For sure, for sure.
Not to say that they won't still call it a wetland, but yes, that was completely removed.
Whether or not it's jurisdictional
Yeah.
could change.
So, yeah, I was shocked too when that came out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And that, I guess, is part of the bigger picture. Before I spend a whole bunch more money
I know
with
the
where we
feeling.
are, we want to make sure this is doable.
Because if we can get that out, I think it changes your scenario substantially.
And I don't know that costs a bunch more money. I mean, I think
It
that's
costs money.
That's
It all
well,
costs
or
money.
it's a trip to the NRCS office and visit with those folks once and see what they say, you know. But yeah, I'm with Mr. Poppins. If get rid of that wetland, just looking at the map, I mean, that solves your access point quite easily, you know. If you could come down to the south end of that property and just loop right back around. I'm not so sure. I don't know. Is it that wet right along is it wet right up to the fence? Super wet?
Depends what year.
Yeah.
Typically it dries out. The last few years it's been dry.
Mhm.
It's pretty dry right now, but
I mean, even building, you know, if you could somehow take that down to the south fence line and then bring it over to the highway, it just looks to me, even just building a little bit of that wetland up as you came out might, I don't know if
sure.
you guys have
Well,
taken a
one of
look
the
at
things
that.
we talked about is if we, between Lot 9 and Lot 11, if we were to bring that road down on that lot line
Yeah.
and bring that out, it's you know, clearly some cost to go through there with the road. But if, you know, if our hands are tied unless we do that, then I think that's the next step that we have to look at.
I'm pretty reluctant to approve a cul-de-sac of that length. It's just, we'll face this time and time again on other developments. And we've faced it in the past and we've made them change it and it's been shoved a little bit, but this is a pretty substantial extension of how far we would normally approve. And given the fact that a wetland determination has not been done on it, I think there's some questions that we would really like to know before we would approve a plan for that development, at least for myself. We've talked about how that road is and whether it should be a right-of-way. We talked about the length of that. We talked about possibly getting that wetland determination so we know if that could substantially change how you access in and out of there. Board, the other part is are we recommending that they carry on a conversation with the adjacent property for access? I think those are 4 things that I've heard that I think maybe need a little more investigation. Unless there's something further, I would actually move just to table this then and until enough time. Do you need more than 30 days, 60 days? I know you always want to get going. The determination's going to be the toughest thing right now.
I think we can manage in a month.
Okay.
It's just
Is the next, is the adjoining development next month, Toby?
Yes.
Okay. I think it'd be nice to hear those together somewhat.
Okay, with that, I would move to table this to our next month.
I'll second it, Scott. Or, wait.
I still have a couple questions.
Yeah. you have some-
Go ahead. It doesn't
And we
stop the
better I
discussion.
suppose you better go through the whole process. We gotta find if there's any
yeah.
opposition.
On the plan, sure.
Scott, on your plan, like the last development we looked at tonight, they had detention ponds and all that. I see here, it kind of shows like it's just draining right into the wetland. Why I've dabbled a little bit. Can you drain right into the wetland or do you need to have detention ponds?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, that's good point.
I'm sorry. We can, it's following its existing drainage patterns for one thing. So there's really no issues that as far as I'm aware of for draining into an existing wetland. You're feeding that wetland, which is what you're supposed to do.
I think it's trying to make sure that the change in, that the change in drainage isn't affected, and if it is, that you hold that and discharge it at the appropriate rate.
Correct, correct.
And-
Changing the drainage is, that's the standard by which we're trying to meet is, off-site drainage and even drainage to a wetland, if that's increasing or decreasing or whatnot, that we're trying to keep it as close to what it's doing right now.
Because Chairman Jungling brings up a good point. If it increases the volume of water in that wetland, that it looks to me like that's going to create problems further going south.
The initial drainage calculations that we have, again, for this discussion point come up about 4 times tonight already, is that this is a rural residential development with about an acre and a half plus or minus lot size. Argue all you want to, the all conventional civil engineering and drainage standards will tell you that the runoff is less than agricultural fields in a residential residential neighborhood with grass in it, bigger lots than even like a cornfield. Obviously the usage and runoff are 2 different things. I think that's been talked about. Corn is going to suck the life out of that water, but it's not going to slow it down during a rainstorm.
Well, I think what gets where the misunderstanding there is you're assuming that we're assuming that we have a completely full tank, and then we're talking runoff. But if you take a big rain event right now in the drought that we're in, there's a lot of it's going to go in the ground in a cornfield before it runs off. Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I could say the same thing about grass.
Yes and no. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I don't know that it's anything more, and you have to take into consideration the depth of grass roots and what the profile that they're drawing the moisture out of, and so they aren't pulling as much water holding capacity out either. But yeah, I'm not an engineer. I'm just a lifelong farmer that have watched how this works, and I just know what I see, and I'm not educated on it, but
Well,
that's what happens.
I understand that, and I didn't prove any of this stuff. I'm just pulling it out of textbooks that I've studied from. And that's,
Completely understand.
So you're sitting with a couple farmers at least that will argue it. I have a daughter at SCSU, and I don't know where you attended or not, but she's a civil engineering student. So I'm tasking her to graduate from there with a perspective from an ag producer and trying to figure out why what the engineering tells us is different than what reality is.
Mm-hmm.
And because reality is you change the use of that land from ag use, it's a completely different beast for whatever reason. And statistics and then the numbers will tell you one thing, but for some reason it doesn't meet the reality. So, and
perhaps we need to have a
somebody in the
conversation with our civil engineering
Yes.
professors. I don't know.
And we've seen it with, I mean, you go up to Schindler and you just look at some of the problems we've had in the northern part of the county. I mean, those weren't problems in big rains back in the 1900s, and now they are, So, and as development gets more and more, it's just something we have to be cognizant of. And we're also not trying to throw engineering degrees out the window because I think they're very valuable. But I will, a lot of times I will take lifelong residents' opinions on drainage versus somebody that's had very little knowledge of the local area.
All right, I think we had a lot of drainage discussions. So yeah, I'm gonna make one comment here quick. If it drains into that wetland there, it could affect the other neighbors. Maybe make it harder for a new road, but those concerns we can talk with later. Thank you very much. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to add for us? That's still your time. We haven't even done input yet.
Yeah.
I think so. We're good.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate your information. All right, at this time, I'd like to ask anyone from the public to speak, that would like to speak for the application, come forward. And seeing none, I would like to ask anyone against the application to come forward. Okay, seeing none, I will close the floor to public comment, and I will ask a motion from the commission so we can discuss.
I will offer the same motion to table this until our next meeting with the additional topic of retention and detention of the storm waters. So
I will second that, and I don't know if I can add anything to it, but the only other thing I'd like to hear is if you guys could maybe visit with Mr. Vanderwerf and see what his thoughts are on that wetland and how that might affect him. So other than that, I'll second the motion to table.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, counselors, commissioners? Wrong meeting. All right, I think we did have our discussion kind of already, so with that, we have a motion and a second to table, and I'll do roll call. Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins.
yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
and I vote yes also. Thank you, guys. We'll do a little homework, and we'll
Yeah.
have another conversation next month.
Thanks, guys.
Mr. Brown?
Okay, last item. So this next item is an amendment to the zoning ordinance, specifically Article 3 and Article 26, which is the A1 agricultural district in the definitions section. So at last month's meeting, staff provided you the draft, which I labeled as option number 1. And we discussed it briefly, and then there was a recommendation that we schedule a public hearing to consider public comment on this item. And then further discuss the item in a public session. During that time, staff also drafted an option number 2, and not to completely confuse the topic, but I guess I'll back up a little bit. Of the impetus behind this is that we've had over the previous 2 months, we had an application for what I would call types of agribusiness type operations. And then we've also had a planned development district that would incorporate agritourism, agribusiness activities into a planned development district. And so what we really identified is that we lacked definitions for some of the uses that we had that previously in the past we've allowed agribusiness, agritourism type activities. But in doing that, staff also identified that we would really want to identify specific uses so that the public would know kind of what those different uses were. And that was what really option number 1 was, to incorporate new types of uses into the zoning ordinance. And then as staff, we reviewed this and we're putting this together, we identified that this wasn't utilizing the existing framework that we currently have. And the existing framework that we currently have is we do have a pretty broad home-based occupation regulations. That there's many uses that we would allow property owners to in Lincoln County to utilize home-based businesses. However, that they are limited by the amount of customers that can come onto the property, different types of hours of operation, those different types of things. So the second version or the option would build upon kind of our existing framework of home-based occupations, and then if those criteria could not be met, such as the number of visitors on the property or the hours of operation or some of those employee type things, then we would create this framework that would allow then a next use, or essentially a specific use within the zoning ordinance. And so really in drafting this, I think staff recognized a couple things. Is that one, we wanted to incorporate a setback into these items. Is that typically what we see is, over the last 2 months, is that adjoining neighboring property owners are concerned with commercialization of property adjacent to them. But what we also recognize as Lincoln County is that agritourism, agribusiness are becoming very popular, and in some cases, very necessary for different property owners to maintain their existing property and to utilize their existing property. And so I've mentioned to a couple of you that really what I would recommend tonight is that we take some public comment on this issue, but then we continue to maybe work on kind of molding option number one and option number two, but then also having kind of an overarching discussion of kind of how do we want to proceed with these different types of things. Because there's no disputing that allowing these agritourism, agribusiness activities, you are allowing limited commercial type activities into the agricultural area, which our current zoning ordinances specifically, zones out those different types of things. We say if you're going to do those different types of activities, you need to rezone to a commercial type use for your property. So there's an argument, do we continue to operate that way, or how do we mold these different types of uses into that? And then first and foremost, also protecting our agricultural uses. Should we define it further that, is there a problem with UPIC operations with a certain threshold? Because that seems to be the things that most property owners would like to do is to do pumpkin patches, corn mazes, those different types of things that are limited type, agricultural type commercial activities. And so in saying that, I've talked more than I wanted to on this item, but really what we want to do is we recognize the need for this, but we do, as staff, I recognize that we need to discuss this a little bit further than just tonight saying option one or option two, and to proceed with this, to go with that. And then one other thing that I've mentioned to a couple of you is that, our staff were requesting from the Board of Commissioners additional funds to complete an update to the comprehensive plan. A lot of this fits into an update of the comprehensive plan as well too, as what limitations do we want, how does it operate, and those different types of things. So what might come out of this whole discussion too is you're just going to say, hey staff, we just want definitions for what we have now, and then we'll proceed with other things down the road with what we want to do. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or to engage in more dialogue with the board on kind of how we should proceed with this.
So, thanks, Toby, and your office for putting this together, because I know over the last couple of months we've had these, and it basically lack of definition or lack of designations maybe has become the point of argument. So I think it's good that we've got these new designations to discuss. I agree with the setbacks. I think that there's a lot of these, especially with some of them that we've heard the last couple months, that if a setback would have been in order, I don't think we would have had an issue at all. And so it became a gray area because there wasn't a designation, plus there wasn't a setback. And I guess it's my opinion that these types of businesses should be treated just the same as a livestock CAFO. Maybe not have as deep a setbacks, but I think they should have some, because I think we should protect the neighbors from having an all-night pumpkin patch or an all-night apple orchard right across the road and having nothing to deal with that. So I'm in favor of not only the setback on the agritourism. Now, explain that. Would the agritourism be one designation, Toby, or do the rest of these fall underneath of the agritourism?
A little bit of both, but we'd have to work on it, I think.
What's that?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
But I think we'd have to work on that a little bit.
I mean, would there be a section of agritourism which would contain agritainment, direct market business, farm-based tourism, guest farm, rec facility, wayside stand type of deal, or would those all be their own designations?
Wayside stand, yes. The rest, agritourism.
Okay.
It's a little bit more broad than being specific in option.
So if we adopted a setback on agritourism, it would pertain to the other designations that we mentioned, other than wayside stand?
I would say anything other than agriculture, yes.
Okay.
So anything above agriculture that would be those different types of events.
Right, right, right. But like, for example, the one we had a couple months ago that wanted to be a private rec facility, well, now we've dropped private off of it. We've made it a rec facility and we put a definition there. Would the setback apply to that?
No.
No.
But the definition would limit it to specific recreation, golf, those, different types of recreational activities. So I think the main thing is being broad with agritourism would give the county some flexibility as things evolve. It's almost, a lot of these agritourism type activities they're new, and there's newer things every year with it, but this would give us flexibility with that. But it would still require the same safeguards and the same public process as a conditional use permit would.
Mm. So just so I got it right, so agritourism would be its own designation, and then you'd have like agritainment, and direct market business, farm-based tourism, guest farm, rec facility, sawmill, wayside stand. They would be their own designations as well.
Well, under option 1, yes. Under option 2, no. All those items minus sawmill and recreation facility would fall under agritourism.
Oh, they would. Okay. Okay.
So you could be agritourism and also be farm-related business? Would those two go together in some instances?
Separate, yeah. Because
Well,
you're on option
yes
1
and
or
no.
2.
This is on option 2.
Okay.
Because if you're an apple orchard that gives the kindergarten class a tour, and then you sell apples, you're both, right?
I would view those as agritourism, which is why we still need to maybe define this a little bit more. But the farm-related business would be the seed sales, would be your machinery repair and those different types of things.
Okay, so if somebody had a honey operation and sold honey, that would be agritourism.
Correct. Depending how we wanted to define it, things like that. Yes.
Yeah. So you're in your mind, your definition of farm-related business would be somebody, a seed business off the farm or something more along that line. A tractor mechanic, somebody that's doing diesel work out of their shop or something like that.
So the farm-related business, in my mind, would be, and maybe it needs to be further defined, is we allow a home occupation for those different types of activities, except if the threshold isn't met, number of visitors, hours of operation, those different types of things. Then those operations would flip to a farm-related business. But the agritourism part of it would be those specifically agritainment, visitor farms, direct market, and those different types of things.
Those would fall underneath agritourism.
Yeah.
Corn mazes, tree farms, apple orchards, stuff like that. I mean, that's all agritourism.
Correct.
Okay.
But in going through this discussion, I can see how it's confusing, which one would be which one. So in a way, you could go with one or the other type thing too, and leave those other things as home occupations, and then if they don't meet the threshold, then they just are not allowed. Which we don't typically have those issues with those types of operations. Most of them do meet the criteria for it.
I think that, you could dumb this probably down and take your, your guest farm, the direct market business. You could take some of those and just loop them all up into the agritourism. We'd have that one designation, and then you'd have These rec facilities, probably a different one, and your farm-related business. Oh, maybe I'm looking at a different sheet. I don't think so.
Toby, not to say that this isn't confusing enough the way it is. Business in which they do, how should I, yoga? I've seen it on television, have not participated in which they use goats.
Oh, yeah. The goat yoga.
Where exactly does that fit in this? I'm, you know,
That might be an
I will
adult business
never
there.
get, I wish I could see the
Adult
look on
entertainment.
everyone's faces right now that I would bring that up, but it's kind of one of those things that are extreme. Is even what we're talking about now with these changes address something like that?
Well, I think, you know, just going through this discussion tonight is you're clearly, first and foremost is we've got two different versions there, which we're trying to compare back and forth, which I don't think they're comparable. I think it's a little bit of, if you can mix them together and do some things, but they're not comparable. You know, the yoga, the goat yoga would be a home occupation.
I could hear this going on for months. Poppins and his goats. Don't have any ghosts, but go ahead, sorry.
Would be a home occupation if the threshold's not met, that would flip to a farm-related business.
I think one way to look, you might be able to take experience type services on tourism and farm market or farm related businesses as something with a product.
I agree. As soon as it becomes livestock, it's different.
I like that idea, yeah. Experiences and products, yeah.
What do we count as a case?
Yoga goats or not?
guess
Nice
not.
try.
How about somebody that's got a existing farm and the city's grown up to them, but they're not in the city, not in the city yet. They want to convert their grain bins to I'm gonna say Airbnb, but could be rental or something like that. They want to turn it into some type of tourism for people to come and stay and.
In a grain bin?
That's
In a
an
grain bin.
option one is a guest farm.
Would that fall under guest farm? If it's a commercial just for, okay?
So that'd be an experience that could be ag tourism.
So currently, they would have to rezone the property to
With
allow
their
that.
bathing
But that would be, as you mentioned, yes, that would be under option one, that would be a farm-based stay or something.
No, individual units.
I wonder if my children have done that.
Could we touch on the ag workforce housing for just a second? I mean, with some of our previous discussion about trying to push residences more into municipalities, is that something does that fit into our discussion on that?
So if I can, for trying to understand that a little bit, could I ask one question on that? So the demand, is it a situation that they have to be on site for some of these facilities for wanting to have the housing? I know there's a huge issue with trying to find housing for workers, but do they have to be on site versus if they bought a parcel of land and developed and put inside a municipality as an alternative? I'm just trying to make sure that.
So first and foremost, it's not a provision that's allowed right now. So if someone wanted to have farm labor stay on their site or adjacent to their site, it's not allowed. They could obtain eligibility or utilize an eligibility for a farm structure, a single-family dwelling. But the definition of our, they can't have more than three unrelated by blood living in one structure. So if you wanted what I call dormitory type housing or something like that, it's not allowed currently in the county. Just single family.
Has there been a request for that or a need for that?
No formal requests, no.
Okay.
Just discussions that staff has had in the past with different operations.
It was, I think, common in parts of the country where they have a lot of migrant type of labor. But that's not what we're talking about the need for here. This is permanent housing.
Talking like farm hands, like, right?
Yes.
Right.
But it's not limited to single-family dwellings, correct?
Correct. If this provision was adopted, it would allow dormitory type multiple family or multiple dwelling type structures.
And would it limit it to just where the current facility is, or could they build it anywhere?
I think the condition as drafted says that they'd first and foremost would have to have an eligibility, a building eligibility, would utilize that.
They'd have to have second eligibility.
And then they would have to, it would only be occupied by the labor force, and then when not occupied, that it would convert back to an accessory type structure. And then the dwelling would be removed, renovated when it was removed. So
But
one option that we could add in there is it would have to be attached to their own, to the operational land.
Well, because my concern would be is, okay, so if they own a quarter section of land 2 miles away and they want to use the housing eligibility over there and they put up a 8-plex and 20 years from now, there's no need for it, what do we do with it's pretty hard to turn that back into a single family, acreage site or dwelling that people want to live in, so. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? But I mean, if it's with the existing farm place, I mean, if I build one on my place for my 8 workers or something, then it's kind of got to go along with that maybe versus sticking it down the roadways. I don't know, am I making any sense there?
So typically how we would do it is, we would probably entertain a plan development. If currently somebody came in and said they wanted to do this. I can't see that we've ever turned anybody down or not facilitated a request that came in. But that's how we would handle it and go through that process with it. So I think there is a provision for it that would allow us to do it.
I'm just on the record as I'm gonna frown on doing something, allowing something like this. At this time, at least.
The housing or the?
The housing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it can all be so different that it would be, should at least be considered individually, per individual request instead of a blanket.
And of course,
amendment.
Staff, we have concerns about, these different types of structures. I mean, now you're going from a single-family dwelling into an IBC type structure. So, do you require sprinklers? Do they, how's the sewage handled and those different types of things? And how is ingress and egress handled? There's many things that we don't typically deal with because we don't, in the county, allow multiple family.
I think we're fortunate we have enough municipalities that are capable, again, to have a parcel of land that could be zoned for multifamily, and they can put an apartment building up there if they need housing themselves versus putting it again out in the country and adding to the complications out there, so. I just don't think that there's a need directly at this time.
Yeah, I mean, all those things you just brought up, that we're not prepared for at the county level, the municipalities are. I mean, they've got that. You can build an apartment complex in Canton, they know what's needed and what they need to do and so forth, so maybe that's where they should stay. I didn't realize they'd be multifamily deals.
Well, that's what basically they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see a lot of issues with that going on. And then, not to keep beating on it, but yeah, all of a sudden we start using up one housing eligibility to, Mike's kids all want to live in one place and only use up one housing eligibility. They build an apartment complex and here this is for my kids and they're all my farm workers. These types of things will start happening.
Don't forget the goats.
And the yoga instructor.
And the yoga instructor that they need for all of your workers.
So yeah, maybe, what do you get? I mean, maybe scratch that whole part?
I would like us just, again, I'm asking that we just not even consider that out in the rural area. We have municipalities that could have a parcel that's multifamily and they could place that. I think it would work for them versus us trying to guess and start throwing darts at what this should be worded and allowed and make a mistake that costs for generations afterwards for us. So, but again, that's just my thoughts. I'm not trying to influence anybody.
What would we do if someone has one farmhand and they work on the place year round? I mean,
They could use an eligibility, if it's a family member, isn't it still allowed that a son or daughter or something, family member can build a structure? Or did we completely remove that?
Well, somewhat if it's within a farmstead, but we typically, the only one that we really have is Bar K has a farmhand on site. And that's utilized as a building eligibility in a single-family dwelling, and it is a family that resides there.
Okay.
So that
A
is
family.
allowed, you know.
Yeah, I think if it's a single-family dwelling, I mean, we just handle that like you handle your one per quarter type deal, you know, your 1 per 40 acres. I think so in that case, if it's one person, or even if they have two, then you just have to use up 2 single-family dwellings to take care of it instead of trying to put it, you know, I think the issue is the multifamily dwelling, basically. Yeah.
or if all Mike's kids want to come stay at one time.
Right.
I
He
can tell
brought
you.
it up, I didn't.
But Toby, correct
You
me if
have
I'm
not met
wrong.
my 3 children, and they
like,
do
we
not
got-
want
we
to
got
ever
a-
live next to each other.
We got a deal north of Canton here where it's a son and his wife, and then they built another house there for their parents, but they own it all. It's not been replatted. Is that not allowed? I mean, can you have 2 residential structures on,
2 structures.
2
They just
residential,
can't be
it can't be replatted?
That's a longer story.
Oh.
So if
But
I
didn't you
recall, it's the one you're talking about, is they built it for a daycare on the other side of it.
No. Maybe I opened up a can of worms I shouldn't have, but it's built, so.
So I'll answer that differently. I thought we were talking about Lava Sort of Town.
Oh, no.
So that one that you're mentioning was before me. So I believe that they were issued a conditional use permit for that.
Oh, okay.
Which was that's not allowed.
Okay.
I think that's what I was referring to. We used to, that was an acceptable practice if it was a family member or something. That's why I was curious if we had completely removed that as an option, so.
Interpretation,
Yes, okay.
So we did advertise this public hearing. What I see tonight, though, is that what I'd like to do is maybe do a work session with this, where we just maybe have some dialogue with each other about it.
Mhm.
First and foremost, as staff, is I want this as simple as possible for administration-wise, but also for the public-wise. Because again, first and foremost, with any amendment that we're talking about here, we are allowing commercial-type activities into the agricultural area. And those can and do conflict with property owners, so we need to make sure that we fully vet and think about what it is that we're going to allow in here. But saying that, also recognizing the need that we do have a demand from landowners to utilize their property for their agricultural property for activities that can generate additional income and diversify what they're doing right now.
Toby, I think we should maybe ponder, Mr. Chairman, if I may, ponder into, as we're truly seeing unbelievable growth into rural areas, and some farmsteads are getting gobbled up in the process, and some of them are pretty substantial operations, and the area keeps transitioning. And we have faced this already, where somebody will buy an acreage and they're trying to run a shop out of there, and you know, they're truly not just the farm of 60 years ago. We had a little barn on it, and a dairy barn not too far from me has been taken down here recently that stood there 100-some years. I mean, those are not the operations today, and they're truly are industrial almost in nature. You know, grain drying situations, or pretty substantial shops that rival, you know, a lot of truck shops in town. Do we need to have that conversation yet as to how we transition some of those properties a little more appropriate, that had been just an ag venture, but now is, because of the size of the structures that have been placed on it and the values of those, that they they get transitioned into a different classification if it's no longer used for ag purposes? Or do we just leave it alone? I'm just looking for guidance on that.
You know, I don't see the transition issues right now. You know, not to say that that isn't gonna happen in the future. You know, I think what you're pointing out is what we're seeing as staff is we are permitting, you know, and I tell staff we can't say this word because it's not true, but shouses is typically the thing that we're seeing now. And we are concerned that a lot of these are gonna turn into businesses, if not, that's what their intentions are. And that's just not, you know, the agricultural area, which is our predominant district and our predominant future district, is strictly agriculture. And it's not these types of activities that we're seeing, you know, like truck repair and those different types of things. And it's creating some conflicts with some neighbors already out in those areas.
Personally, I don't know that I see a substantial, the shouse being a problem because someone has an acreage, they can put a shop up and do the same, you know, what you're talking about and have done it in the past. So a shouse would be a little more difficult because they actually reside in it, and the likelihood they're going to try to run a not a desirable business where they're living would be pretty, I think, undesirable for a situation. So I may disagree with you on that a little bit, only in the regard that any acreage where they have a house and put a shop up, they can try to run a business out that shouldn't be, so.
What I anticipate we're seeing though is a lot of those types of structures are contractor shops. And they're just.
Oh, we're seeing, and that gets back to what I was talking about. We have an acreages here, or even a rural, and they put up and I know of one that we're already had recently discussed where it was going to be just a small operation and they explode, and before you know it, and we really need to be cautious, and so, but.
All right, with all that said then, do we motion to table and review this, or table until we create a workforce study?
Work session.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would recommend, given it was advertised as a public, just to go through the step of asking the audience. But.
All right, so no further questions of staff? All right, with that, I'll ask for public input on these two options. All right, seeing no public input, I'll close the floor, and I'll ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to table till we can maybe, I like the idea of having a work session where we can visit on it. Maybe we should make a motion to have a work session. Or maybe we don't have to make a motion.
I don't know, do we have to make a motion on that?
Or do we just?
Motion to table?
It would depend on if you need want to have a public comment period again. If you table it for a definite period of time, you've held the public hearing. You wouldn't have to go through that. Correct me if I'm again wrong, Toby, but we wouldn't have to hold the public hearing, but we may want to hear from the audience. So if you just simply.
But if we change, but if we adjust it, then we would have to have the public hearing again, correct?
Yeah, I think we would anyways, because we would come out with a new draft.
Yeah.
Session. So I'm, staff perspective, it'd be fine just to table it. And then the one thought that I had with, you know, and I'm gonna say agribusiness is a big topic too, but I think the rezonings to rural residential and some of these other issues that we have is maybe it'd be good at this stage to have a joint work session with the Board of Commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
And really kind of have a dialogue with kind of where we're headed with some of these things. You know, not just, I'll say rezones in general, residential, commercial, industrial, but then also these different types of agribusiness activities.
Yep.
So.
I think that'd be good.
I like that idea.
Yep.
So we won't get that scheduled in 30 days. We'll have to work on that a little bit, but we'll get that scheduled as soon as possible.
So the motion will be to table, and we'll bring it back around when we're ready.
At such time as we can schedule a meeting jointly.
Mhm.
Second, Johnson.
Second, whatever Toby said. All right, any discussion on that? All right, seeing none. I'll do a roll call to table it until such time we can set a meeting and bring it forward again. So Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
and I also agree, yes. With that, was that considered new business, Toby? Or we still got to do new business?
No new business.
No new business, all right. Then I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Scott?
I'll second instead.
All right, motion and second. Any conversation, discussion? Seeing none. We will call for roll call. Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling says yes.